We shouldn't be doing gender stereotyping totally. Education is all about absorbing lessons from your environment. So it's good to be a good human being because a good human being always gets a lot of support from a lot of people.
Hello and welcome to the episode of Off the Shelf number 2. And here I am with Arundhati Bhattacharya. That's her book. It's a wonderful, engaging read. Ma'am Bhattacharya doesn't need any introduction. She's many things, but she was also the first chairperson. And I'm saying that even though she had to fight she finally became the chairman, as she will tell you, and an anecdote that she'll share later of the State Bank of India. She was literally the banker to us all, and she's written this wonderful book called Indomitable. And it really is about courage. It's about women. It's about working. It's about breaking glass ceilings. It's about childhood. And it's also about her love for literature. So here we go. And so welcome. This is the week's attempt to bring authors, face to face with all our readers. So it's wonderful to have you here. And I wanted to say how wonderful the book was. It's very interesting reading. So I wanted to ask you, you start the book saying that your mother said that you were a reader and when were you going to write? So why did it take you so long to write this? And did the pandemic help? Was it that?
I really think it's one of the byproducts of the pandemic. The pandemic has many good byproducts, not many good byproducts, many bad byproducts, and some good byproducts. I think this is one of those some good byproducts in my life. Because I got the time, at least during weekends, I needed to do something different. As you know, at that point of time, I had just taken over the Salesforce role as the Indian CEO. And, it was quite a struggle coming from finance into IT and everything being virtual. I had never set up a computer system myself, as chairman, everything used to be done for me. And here, I had to set up everything, including the VPN, and even with a person guiding me, even then, you have to be able to locate the right, the buttons and the right messages and all kinds of things. So, it was quite a different kind of an experience, very challenging, but also when you did it quite,
satisfying,
energizing.
Especially
if I do it on my own, I felt even better, that I had been able to, climb that small hurdle. But over the weekends, obviously you want to relax. And I found writing this book quite cathartic, actually, in the sense that, a lot of things that had been piling up in my mind, I wanted to actually put it down and see whether it was worth the read. And like my mother had been telling me for a long time since my childhood, my school principal had suggested I study literature because at that point of time, I also questioned why he should have, sort of recommended literature for me. So I really wanted to make an effort and see whether this would work. And then when I started writing, I found it quite enjoyable. So I think, yes, it was one of those things that would not have happened had the pandemic not happened, had I not got that period of time.
So, it's interesting you talk about this weekend relaxation, because one of the things that you were instrumental in is, and you talk about that in the book, and I would like you to talk about that as, the idea that, the pandemic has really changed, which is that work isn't life. There is, while there is that idea, there's also the idea that the work, the space between work and home is blurred completely because we're all working out of home. So we're working much more, but we've also realized that work, there's so much more to sustain. And you talk about this being in the bank and working tremendous number of hours. And when you say that you started out in Kharagpur when you just got married, you said that you were there, and I think you said your house was 5 minutes away, but you never came home till 8:30. So can you talk about that, and then how you push towards sort of having 2 Saturdays off and why it's so important? So can you talk a little bit about that?
So, in India specifically, I would say, the woman is still the primary caregiver. and the person in the house who determines a lot of things about how the house runs. Especially, our generation, it was more so. The men didn't make the decisions about, what they would like to eat, or how who's going to go marketing and shopping. At the most, if you gave them a list, they would help out by going out and getting the stuff. That's where their role ended. It was nothing to do about the house, and it was all your job. Now, if that is the case, what happens is you yourself are working a full-time job, and then you have this full-time housework. How does one balance all of that? So one thing, of course, that I did was, I got the right kind of help who would help me out at home.
Yeah.
And there were a lot of these jobs that didn't actually need to be done by me. So I didn't actually need to determine what menu would be there on the table every day. As long as I gave them the broad framework. And then I found that it's the same at office. If you give them the broad framework, what needs to be done, the actual pieces, the micro pieces of it, the smaller pieces of it, how the puzzle fits together is your job. But the smaller pieces of it, once you've divided it up between team members, they know exactly what to do. They have their own ideas. They will, sort of bounce it off you. You ensure that it's in sync with whatever somebody else is doing, and you have the whole. So both at work and at home, I realized that, that it is not important to get into the nitty-gritty and into the details, but allow that particular team to work in a way by giving them direction, showing them the vision, getting their buy-in, and after that, leaving them to perform and show how well they're being able to do it or understand it. So I think those were some of the things that enabled me to do that work-life balance. All the same, given the number of jobs that we have to do, I used to feel that at least 2 days off is mandatory. Because, whatever is left over you do in the day off, and we had only 1 day off. Okay, so only Sunday was off. The half day was actually a joke. Nobody gets away with the half day. At the most, instead of 30, I'd be coming home at 7. That's the only concern. And that you're coming back just as exhausted. Okay? So the thing is, a 2-day weekend definitely helps women, because at least they get 1 day to themselves for some me time, for some relaxation, for doing something that they really enjoy.
Yeah, no, I think you talk about that. I think that, that's one of the things that is evolving across the world now, the idea of needing to recharge and things like that. But, I wanted to talk to you about you talk about consistently in the book about the idea of the image of what a PSU is and actually what amount of work that actually goes. So can you really talk about, and what was really interesting was how much you had to do in the bank. The first time you saw the ledgers, the shutting of the of each vault, going home with the keys. I think you talked about at some point of time, there was this first lathi charge that you lived through, where the biggest worry was the examination papers. So can you really give us a little flavor of what it was to be a banker, looking at all this? Because we only think bankers are really about sitting there and sort of doing accounts, when it's so much more. Can you just talk a little bit about that role?
So when I actually got the job, my mother told me that, why are you taking this job? It just means counting cash. Are you sure you will enjoy doing it? So, I was surprised. I said, what do you mean just counting cash? She said, yeah, that's what guys do in the bank. So she had obviously experienced only withdrawing cash from the banks or depositing. So she'd never gone beyond that. And that was her idea of what it looked like. And in fact, when she visited me in the office, in my office as the branch manager of Kharagpur, she said that this looks like a daftari's office. Daftari is one who keeps all the ledgers and things like that. So many of the things used to come into me. So yes, I understand, that the general idea is that, a banker's life is very boring. You just look at accounts and nothing else. It's far from that, far, far from that. Because at the end of the day, what you are actually giving is a service. You are giving a service and you are giving it to customers who are human beings. And what makes it interesting is that every single human being is different. They want different types of service. Some people demand a lot of attention. Some people get by themselves. Some people are very finicky. And I've had a court case launched against me for non-payment of 13 paise of interest.
Oh my God.
So all kinds of things are there. And then there are people who are so appreciative of every single little thing you've done. So during demonetization, for instance, I've written in the book, there is this old lady in Bangalore who came with rosebuds for all my people, for the people in the branch who were doing that very difficult job, staying up 10, 11, 12 in the night. She came and gave them all a rosebud each. One morning to say thank you. So there are people like that as well. So you get to meet a variety of people. You get to do a lot of different things.
You get to dodge snakes, for example, in one case.
Yep, absolutely. I have held, more than 12 roles. Forget about individual roles and the variety you get in them, whether it be handling of snakes or whether it be setting right a fuse. All of that is par for the course. But the fact that, I dealt with retail customers, I dealt with corporate customers, I dealt with treasury customers. So they're all different kinds and they're doing all different things. And for every single thing you have, there is a separate learning curve and therefore a separate challenge. I got to open new businesses in a public sector, setting up a new business. That's what entrepreneurs do. That's what the public sector does. But the public sector were also doing this. And they were doing it from within their companies. It's not that somebody else was coming and setting it up for them. So I got to do a lot of very, very interesting things. Even, in the role as a CDO, and I had thought that, here I've been sort of pushed out of operations. The amount of insight I got into the employee's mindset. Because still looking at customers. All external. I was not looking at what was happening to my own people. And if you look at a services industry again, what is the raw material in the services industry? It's your human resources. Nothing else. Right? No, metal, there is no chemical, there is no nothing. This is not discrete manufacturing. This is basically, your people who are delivering. And if you are looking after those people, if you don't oil your machines and and everything, the machines won't perform. Here they are not machines and therefore far more sensitive and they require far more care because they're human beings. That getting that realization was a big realization for me and a big gain for me, I think personally. It was definitely something that opened my eyes about what the challenges were and how people were reacting to them. How the generations were changing, how the priorities of the earlier generation were no longer the priorities of the younger generation. So a lot of insights, and therefore I think, banking is something where you can get to do many things. Accounting is just a very small part. Today, most of the accounting is done by the systems.
And the computers. I mean, I think you had that wonderful story about actually counting this thing of cash. You had this story about actually being a detective. Can you talk about that? Where it was really like a short story. Finding out this thing about everybody this guy who kept taking money. Then you stopped a fraud because somebody had half a signature. So it's clearly much more than just sitting and listening. So can you talk a little bit about that incident and also about fighting off snakes?
Fighting off snakes was really good. But Kharagpur has been built on a place which earlier was a sal jungle. So there was not a single house in the quarter we lived in, IIT quarter we lived in, where I did my investing. Not a single house. I found them in the kitchen, I found them in the bathroom, I found them in the living room, I found them in the drawing room,
and in your bank.
As well as in the bank. So of course, one of the things that we had to do was, we used to use carbolic acid pretty, regularly. That's the only way that they will stay away. They don't like the smell, and I don't blame them.
But it's terrible.
The only way that you could sort of protect yourself. And also keeping your surroundings clean. That's the only way. But the fact of the matter is not all snakes are poisonous, right? So you also have to understand that we have taken over their habitat. And they're not fault because they are sort of getting into your house. And in fact, out of all of those snakes that we saw, there was only one that my husband actually killed, and he has forever regretted it. Because I think, the neighbors egged us on, saying, "Arey, you can't even get that killed," and stuff like that. And he did it. But I think it was a rat snake. Need not have been killed. I don't think it was poisonous. And it was totally unnecessary. And he has actually regretted it. He didn't want to do it. Just got egged on by the neighbors shouting and things like that, and went ahead and did it. It wasn't necessary at all. But having said that, I also think, when you are looking at human beings and the way they interact, when you are talking about that fraud that happened in Kharagpur, again, this is something where you have to be aware of the fact that, things can go in directions that you had not thought of at all. If that happens, then you have to be ready for those challenges. You have to be ready to find out why those things are happening, try and get to the root cause, and if where necessary, if necessary, get in the law enforcement people, bring in the right kind of help in order to help you get across it. But yes, it is very interesting, all that we do in actual life. It doesn't really fit the framework of what you call a banker.
Exactly.
It's not all.
Yeah. So I also wanted to talk to you about, and this is something that you bring out, you say the tag is a working woman's notes on life, work, and leadership. And I really wanted to talk to you about that in some things. You talk about two incidents about where you feel that you said your confidence is shattered because your supervisor keeps correcting this thing. And you also talk about a time when you felt that you had to leave. Can you really talk about being, apart from the fact that you were the first woman to head this, there was also the aspect of when you were not invisible, but when you were a competent woman, but in a sea of men. Can you talk really about that? Can you talk about that aspect, about whether gender plays any role, and when you felt like, when you actually I felt like giving up the job? So,
gender, I would say, does play a role. It's not that you are invisible as a woman. In fact, you're very visible as a woman because there are not that many women around. And that visibility actually is a hindrance, not it doesn't.
Not an asset.
Yeah, it's not an asset. So you have to work past that. You have to work in a way that they stop looking at your gender and start looking at your work. Okay. Sometimes it doesn't work, like that time when I described, about my boss, unnecessarily putting a lot of corrections.
This was a Calcutta, right?
Yeah, something which I thought was drafted quite well. So if you just want to make English changes where the meaning doesn't change, I don't think it has any meaning. And even today, you can ask my people, I rarely make changes unless I think that there is something to actually contribute in the meaning. Because as long as communication is clear and you are saying what you need to say, there's no need to get it exactly in the language that you want. It's fine that they use the language. They can be your voice. You need to step back and allow them that peace. And so, while you can make a few changes here, use a different word there, let it go. Because, that's not what you are here for. If there is a value-added piece that has been left out, of course you talk about it. And you get that piece input in. Okay. But otherwise, there is really no need. And therefore, I think, that is where I'm saying that you need these people. And probably this gentleman was doing it not because I was a woman, but because it was a teacher. It could be that as well. I don't know how he reacted with others, and I don't think I bothered to find out because, the fact that he got transferred was such a big relief to me. And so, of course, there I think, luck played a big part as well. But whatever it is, sometimes though this doesn't happen, you don't get that transfer, then you have to take courage in your hands and you have to take a few steps in order to get out from somebody who's deliberately undermining you and get into something else. Then it is important to actually do that. And if you remember, there is an incident in school that I talked about, where this bully was making my life impossible. And I actually took an action, and this was only in class 3. So it was not as though, I was very old or anything. I actually requested my parents to go and ask for
movement section.
Because I just wanted to get away from this guy. I didn't want to be terrorized all the time that I was in school. Okay? So you have to take action sometimes. That's there. But having said that, I think it's not general. There are lots and lots of people who will actually appreciate you for the work that you're doing. Lots of people who will give you that extra also understanding that you are also working at home as well as in the office. Okay? I think, the world is made up of all sorts of people. It's not necessary that, we shouldn't be doing gender stereotyping totally. There are people who have helped me. They have always lent a helping hand. There are people who in the best of circumstances haven't. So, there are all kinds, and they are from both genders. I won't even say that they are only from the male gender. So, making your way in a male-dominated industry is always difficult. It's always difficult because, as I said, you stand out, and because you're visible, you get more closely monitored. So that is the difficulty more than anything else. And that's why, I keep telling people that, while it's important to be noticed, don't make yourself totally irreplaceable. That's not what you are out there to do. Your team should be able to replace you because there will be times when you want to be somewhere else, and you need to be exposed to that as well.
But so let's talk about that a bit. But I wanted to ask you, there is a point of time, and I would want you to narrate the incident when you thought that you should leave the SBI. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, this of course was, in respect of my posting to a much smaller sector, where I thought that my child would not have the kind of educational support that was required for her. I have a special child. I've talked about her in the book.
In the book, yes.
Yeah, she's a very sensitive, very sweet, loving child. And I really thought that it was important that, her education be carried out in the way that was being recommended, which was the integrated schools. And I was not sure this small town would have an integrated school. Speaking, I was so wrong. I was so wrong because the kind of school that I got in Lucknow, I haven't got a similar school in Mumbai. In Mumbai, I had a much tougher time finding something for her than I had in the smaller towns. So, it's all wrong to think that the metros have all the facilities and all the, there are many smaller towns that have better stuff and we don't know about it. That's our problem. This fear that I won't get stems out of ignorance. But I had the good fortune of my mentor telling me that, giving up is the easiest way out. It takes 30 seconds to give up. But after having come here for so long, just try a little more. Actually go there and see what the circumstances are. Don't, take your family along if you feel that it may not work out. Go yourself. For a few days, take your family, go yourself and check it out. If it works, it works. Doesn't, it doesn't.
That's always
the fact is, do not give up till you have tried. You've got to try.
So I think one of the things about the book is that it allows you a certain level of lessons that you have learned, and you've been very, you've been very candid about, the lessons that you've learned. You talk about your childhood, you talk about America. So you go to America, which is, in New York, and you've got a child, you've got your aunt. And you make, it's sort of very difficult life. And you say that you don't want to, you go into the bank and you say, but well, I don't have enough work. And, there's this wonderful, and your boss says, but well, you've been given an opportunity to learn and just do that. So I wanted to talk to you about the lessons of life and how you think, what are the 5 lessons you think that any woman who is one, who's working should have? And then I want to ask you another question, but about whether women can have it all. But can you tell me the 5 lessons you think that all women who are working women should definitely imbibe?
Yes, so one, of course, is that, the book, the way I wrote it, I didn't want it to be a management book. In fact, one of my colleagues, I had given it to a few of them to pre-read. He did say that at the end of the book, you should sort of summarize the management lessons there. So I decided not to, because I thought that people would have more fun picking out those nuggets themselves.
Yeah.
It's like, there are pieces strewn here, there, everywhere. And it's up to you. If you want to take a lesson from it, you do. If you want to just treat it like a story, you do that. It's entirely up to you. I don't want to, sort of dictate the way you look at the book. I have tried to put in a few nuggets of what helped me. And I thought, I could sort of strew them across the book so that you pick them up, and look at it. So that was the idea of writing it in this style. I think one of the reviewers has been very kind. Mr. Subrat Bakshi actually told me that you have raised non-fiction to the level of fiction. And I told him that, sir, I promise you every one of those incidents are true. So it's non-fiction, all right. So he says, yeah, but this writing style is more like a fiction. So whatever it is. The reason was that I didn't want to make it a didactic management book.
No, you don't. But I think there's certain. It's about wisdom. Maybe it isn't about. It's not about the 5 tips, but it's certain about 5 things that are at the heart. So you from the beginning, you certainly seem to learn from what hits you. From very early on. There's a certain perception. You talk about mistakes. You've just talked about your husband killing the snake and how that's haunted him, but you talk about your mother sending your sister away and how that haunted her. Essentially the kind of how we do things and we mistake, and that was the same thing you faced when you sent your daughter away from New York. So I wanted to ask, so maybe we can now talk about that instead. Do you think one of the aspects of actually sending her away was also the fact that this was a decision that haunted your mother, that you felt that you had to take again, and whether you were going to take it, whether it was a wrong decision?
So, it's not that I got impacted by that, but yes, maybe in a way, I did think about it. I thought about it long and hard, and then I decided it was the right thing to do, as my mother had decided at that point of time. It was the right thing to do. But the thing is, education is all about absorbing lessons from your environment. I was just talking earlier, on the state of education, whether there were changes that needed to be made. And of course, education is something which is evolving. And there are always that you can make changes that you can make in order to, make it better, and in order to make it more topical and closer to what you are doing right now. Okay. And something that prepares you for the future and doesn't just look back, right? But the fact of the matter is, education doesn't only come from school and book learning. Education comes from experience. Education comes from the life you have lived. And it's very important for us to absorb those, lessons and sort of internalize them and never forget. For instance, I narrated an incident about one of my teachers telling me to smile because it exercises the maximum number of muscles in the face. So, it's a very simple thing that you do, but, it definitely and truly helps. So, those are the sort of things I think that we need to sort of internalize within ourselves. Similarly, for that matter, I had narrated an incident where the principal of the school counseled me about, stopping the externalization of blame for every single thing that's happening, that's going wrong in your life. Instead, looking internally to see how you may have contributed to it. So that's again something, it's very easy to just lay the blame on others, that this person didn't understand, that person wasn't the right one. It's very easy to do that. But when you sit back and think, sometimes, not every time, but quite often, I would say that there is some amount of provocation from your side as well, or some amount of things that you could have done differently, which you didn't at that point of time. Maybe you could have taken some proactive action then. So I think, it is, as I said, it is the ecosystem that also teaches you a number of things. And that's what I have tried to bring to life. The ecosystem that threw up a lot of challenges, the ecosystem that had us looking at unforeseen, unknown kind of, happenings that you had to face, and you had to sort of manage through. You had to take the right decisions in order to do the best under the circumstances. The best may not always be the right or the actual best, but it's what you did within the circumstances. So I think that's what I tried to get across, that if everybody's life is different, but you can always sit back and think about what those lessons in life have been. But I think if you ask me for 5 lessons, and I'll quickly tell you 3 or 4 things that come to mind immediately. One is that especially for women, I think communication is very important. You need to be able to talk in a manner where you are able to also narrate your achievements and not just do. Being a silent worker is great, but you need to talk about what you have done. I don't mean you go out beating your drum all over the place. You work in a manner that not only you talk about yourself, others speak for you. Okay? So communication is something that's very, very important. The second thing, of course, that I always believe in is that you need to be collaborative. You need to be collaborative, and unless you're collaborative both at work and home, it becomes a very big stress and a very big strain. You have to pull in others to do part of the work for you. And they will do it if you give them the space, if you get their buying, and also, if you're just pleasant to them, if you're good to them. Okay? So it's good to be a good human being, because a good human being always gets a lot of support from a lot of people. So that's the second thing. The third thing I would say is that, again, as I said, that failures, etc., they are very good masters of teaching. You've got to understand what the lesson behind that failure means, or what that lesson behind that adverse circumstance in your life means. You've got to try and understand that. It's not as though I have understood everything. I haven't understood why certain challenges appeared in my life. I haven't. But I try very hard to understand why those challenges were thrown in my path and how have I benefited from it. I try very hard to see that point. The fourth thing I would say is, at least for women, is that, giving up is the easiest thing. Don't give up, not unless you're convinced that that is the best way for you to go. Of course, you can change one job and take up another. Of course, you can work from home. You can do a lot of things. But don't give up on yourself. Don't give up on yourself. And last but not least, I think I must say this, that we must learn to forgive ourselves and others. Forgiving oneself is important, very important. Don't sweat it. If it's gone wrong, it's gone wrong. Learn to forgive yourself. I don't know whether I've learned fully, but I'd love others to be able to do that.
Thank you so much. That's a great way to end. And please pick up the book. Thank you so much. Thank you.